Good morning, all. Welcome to the second edition of the Fireside Chats by Asian Pathfinders. I'm Pallavi. I'll be your host for the morning. And before we commence the session by Colonel Pradhan, where he'll be speaking on the role of Intel in the corporate sector, I'd just like to give you a brief about us. We are a new entity. We are an informal forum where we want to get practitioners, scholars, academics, researchers together to brainstorm, collaborate, and just further each other's understanding on topics which are important to the times we live in. So just like I said about us, I think one of the things is peer reviews is a very important cornerstone of our professional lives. We always reach out to our peers, they support us, and we also provide our support. And I think the inspiration behind our fireside chats is we are currently in a uncertain time. And during the uncertain times of the Great Depression and the World War II, President FDR or Franklin D. Roosevelt of the US would hold these fireside chats. And when his press secretary was asked, why is it called that? He said that it's a way for the president to connect with the people in a time of global uncertainty and in a way of getting people together around a fireside, being just talking to people over a fireside, right? So that's there, and I think that's the idea. We want to be a place where people can feel safe to come discuss their ideas. We want to have a constructive dialogue, and we want to keep it as a knowledge sharing platform. I already spoke about the collaborations. We want to support young professionals. A lot of us, especially in the Asian context, we haven't had that kind of a forum where uh, a lot of forums where people can come and just discuss in a more informal way, not the conferences or the think tank spaces or something, right? Just all of us just come together, and we have the technology to do that, so why not use it? So basically that. And I think just if anyone wants to work on research collaborations, we've already had people reach out to us that they are looking for collaborations, especially with young scholars. So I think this is a very good platform for everyone. If you have a topic and you want to find a collaboration on that similar topic with others, do reach out to us, write to us, and we'll be happy to put you in touch if we have someone else on it. So I think how are we going to execute our idea? Obviously, these weekly discussions that we are holding on a pre-decided topic on a Saturday for now from 11 to 12. So those are the cornerstones of our engagements. And we want our community to give us the topics that they feel that are important, obviously based on the broader themes. But they can come up with a topic. They can find people to collaborate with on a presentation, or we can help you find people to collaborate. Also, because we want people to benefit from the knowledge, vast knowledge base that's out there. We would be sharing on a daily basis articles and reports on our social media pages that we find interesting and we find useful for the current times we are in. So do check out our social media pages, and we'll be posting these sessions that we hold on YouTube to create a repository for everyone to refer on a later stage. We understand that not everyone can attend these sessions because of time limits, other commitments. Definitely check out the YouTube channel. We'll be sharing you the details, and uh, it's a reference document for you, a reference video. So please go ahead. It's for your use only. Uh, so just community guidelines. We all are mature individuals, professionals, but just to keep in mind, respect the views of others. Definitely please ask questions. This is a place for all of us to learn from each other. You might think of a question that none of us can think of. So don't think of it that, oh, why should I ask this question? Please do. And respect the purpose of the community. We are here to share ideas, post questions, comments, learn from each other. And we have to respect each other's intellectual property, right? We all work hard on the research that we do, and I think we should respect each other's. And just lastly, just let's have a constructive, mature discussion. No defamatory comments, abusive language, strong political statements. We want to keep it as constructive as possible, and you can help us. We alone can't be the community police here. We all are just here to learn from each other. So please do. And if you think any issue that you want to flag, please write to us. Our email address is here. And just going forward, you want to reach out, these are our contact details. So moving on to the session for today, why we are here, right? We have Colonel Sushil Pradhan, who will be speaking on the role of Intel in the corporate sector. So intelligence analysis, everyone thinks, oh, it's the spies who do that, the Mossads, the CIAs, the RAWs of the world. But no, a lot of information is just in the open source. A lot of information is human ed, social media intelligence, open source intelligence. We hear these fancy terms. So how do you analyze this information, right? There's so much information these days, the overload of information. So how do we make sense of it? How do we analyze in a corporate sector? Corporate sectors do require that too, just not the governments which do. So how do you make that reliable information that we get into intelligence and then present it ahead to our, as you'll have Colonel Pradhan speaking on it. For the ones who do not know about him, he is an army veteran of 22 years of service. He has worked in counterinsurgency operations in India, as well as he's led UN peacekeeping mission in West Africa. He's trained UN peacekeepers, and he's a global speaker on geopolitics and socio-political risk analysis matters. He's a trusted security solutions provider, and he does lead at MidCat, a vertical which works on risk intelligence and information services, and it's an industry acclaimed vertical. So we are really, really lucky to have Sir here to speak about this with us. So I'll hand it over to Sir to take on the proceedings from here. So thank you, Sir, and over to you, Sushil, Sir.
Once again, very good morning to all of you on this fine Saturday morning. And as Pallavi said, this intelligence, as we talk about it or as we understand it commonly, is not just restricted to the high-flying intelligence agencies, and not everyone is a James Bond. But this is really gaining more and more importance in the corporate world, because people need to figure out how best information can provide them a heads up about how to de-risk their businesses, how to make sure that their businesses function without any stoppages or without any interruptions. And here is where the role of corporate intelligence comes in. So I'm going to introduce very briefly a few concepts. I do understand that a lot of the audience is very young and sort of inexperienced in this field, and with that in view, I have sort of kept the presentation at a very introductory level without going into any details. So this is not a topic that can be dealt with in half an hour or an hour. So definitely there is lots more to it, and I'll tell you later as we go along how you can learn more about this, and so on and so forth. So briefly, what we are going to talk today about is what is corporate intelligence, what are business risks and disruptions, how to convert information to intelligence, and lastly, which would be of interest to many people in the audience, would be that what are the career options in corporate intelligence. So just to sort of contextualize the whole talk, the business world has various risks which are at strategic level, operational level, functional level. So, but for the purposes of this discussion, we are only going to talk about operational and functional, or what we can also call as tactical risks, which can together be clubbed as business risks. And incidents or events that disrupt normal business operations can be called business disruptors. And the understanding and analysis of these business risks is known as corporate intelligence. Very, very broadly, this is not a legislated definition or something. This is just a very simplified version to help you understand. And what is the aim of corporate intelligence is to study trends and stay ahead of the curve so that your businesses can de-risk themselves. Usually this function is handled by security, safety, or admin functions in a corporate entity. And the job actually of doing the corporate intel is entrusted to a team or a single analyst who sometimes work out of a command center or a security operations center, and sometimes they work independently. So, again, just to quickly define some of the terminology which is important to this, and for understanding this better, I would suggest that you read the ISO 31000, which is actually gives out risk management, also ISO 22301. And to quickly sort of summarize, an asset is something which is of value to an organization. So this asset can be the people who work for the company or the organization. process, that is the procedures or the manufacturing technique or the patent which belongs to the company, the technology which belongs to a company, which could be its IT, which could be its processes, which could be its documents, whatever. And lastly, we also have the brand or the reputation of a company, which is really important. And you must have seen so many cases in the recent past where, say, for example, Nestle with Maggie noodles, or United Airlines, where they forcibly offloaded a passenger, or BP, British Petroleum, with its oil spill in off the Mexico coast. So these are things which these are risks which affect reputation. So a threat is a danger which could be natural or man-made, and a vulnerability is any weakness of the asset. So this vulnerability could be in attitude, could be in perimeter, could be in structure, anything. And a risk is a vulnerability. A risk is something when a vulnerability can be exploited by a threat. So if you see this very simplified Venn diagram on the right, it shows you that the intersection of a threat, asset, and a vulnerability is a risk. And how do you reduce risks? So you put in place controls which are countermeasures that reduce risk. I'm not going to talk too much more about this because risk management itself is a vast day-long subject. Suffice to understand that the role of corporate intelligence is to identify which are these risks and what are the best possible control measures to reduce these risks. So risk has great correlation with the context. So it could be financial risk, where we are talking about liquidity, hedging, forex, credit risks, cash flows, things which economists and financial wizards understand better than the rest of us. These could be operational risks, where we are talking about union or labor issues, where plants have been made to shut down because of labor agitation, and somewhere along the line people did not read the intelligence signs properly to predict this happening. Bands and hartals, which also disrupt operations, could be strategic, where it threatens the survivability of the business itself. For example, Kodak going out of business because they did not foresee or they did not prophesize well the onset of digital photography, and continued doing what they had been doing for the last couple of decades. Similarly, geopolitical, where war, terror, trades, and here is a case where even something like the current pandemic has affected some companies. Some companies have gone boomed, and some companies have got bust because of the various fallouts of this pandemic. Legal issues, due diligence, settlements, arbitrations, arguments in different companies, dealing with local laws. So these can also create problems for companies and hence are classified as risks. Socioeconomic risks like petty and organized crime, sorry, that's a typo from my side, it should be crimes, frauds, and loss prevention, especially in the retail sector or e-commerce sector, where supply chains have losses, or malls and retail outlets have shrinkage. Shrinkage is what is termed as, is a very fancy word for chori. So when you have people shoplifting, or you have people in the organization itself pilfering stuff from the warehouses or along the supply chain. And then you have forensics and investigation, which deals with the backgrounds of people that are being employed, where you have fraud, which could be financial or otherwise. Then you have project risk. This is more for those companies or those organizations which operate in difficult areas, for projects like infrastructure, hydropower, electricity, construction, etc., etc. They also have various project risks associated with them. Then information security itself is a big risk which needs to be handled. Crisis management is something which more and more organizations are looking towards formalizing, because when a crisis hits today, the timeline of a crisis from the time it emerges till the time it manifests, till the time it has actually usurped the organization's response, is reducing drastically. So it is very important to read the telltale signs of this emerging crisis, and that's where again corporate intel plays a strong role. BCP is an acronym for Business Continuity Planning. Some of you may have already heard of this. So essentially, it means that when there is a disruption to your business operations, how much can you, how long and how well can you continue operating at a particular accepted level of depression? So it's a complicated subject, but again, here the start point is always that the corporate intel is looking for signs of disruptions coming along. And the last part is disaster recovery, which is more IT related. But again, if you are tracking what is happening in the cyber world, for example, the 5G issue which is happening between China and other countries, the creation of the separate internet by Chinese companies, which is today known and very colloquially as the splinter net. So if you can foresee a lot of these things come along, or state-sponsored cyber attacks, hacking, so this all will fall under cyber threats and hence will get classified into risks under the field of disaster recovery. So risks are important, and we've understood where now corporate intelligence plays its part. And just to tell you very quickly, so risk is the understood as an impact of uncertainty of an object. So it is usually classified as likelihood into impact, and the multiplication factor gives you certain parameters. So you can classify the risks based on what is the likelihood and what is the impact on the organization. And basically risks can either be accepted if they are low or if they don't accept. For example, if you say that oh, there is a risk of earthquake in Mumbai, but the seismic zone study says that the risk of earthquake in Mumbai is negligible, so you accept it and say that okay, I don't need to put in place any specific anti-earthquake measures for my building in Mumbai, whereas that the same risk would not be applicable for Gurgaon, where yesterday itself there was a minor tremor felt due to an earthquake with its epicenter in Rohtak. So organizations which are setting up offices, plants, factories in the area of Delhi NCR would definitely not treat earthquake as an accepted risk. They would have to do something called mitigation. So mitigation is the next step, where taking the same example further, you would have to strengthen your buildings for earthquake. You would have to have earthquake evacuation plans. You would have to have emergency response plans to cater for people get injured or assets that get damaged during an earthquake. Other alternative is that you can also transfer some element of risk. So simplest example of transference of risk is to buy insurance, where you say, okay, I know that my bus which carries my employees to work may meet with a road accident, and if it happens, it's going to be a very horrific scenario. Not only do we have to deal with people who may get injured, but also their medical treatment. So what do? I buy insurance for that bus under the clause of employee transport, and if something does happen and somebody does get hurt, so the company is able to look after its employees from the medical treatment perspective. Or the best is, of course, in case of certain risks which are very high or they are not likely, the current business impact of that will be very high, is to avoid the risk. For example, somebody says that I need to go and study the situation in Syria because we have a very interesting along there. But if your corporate intel tells you that look, for the last 5 days there has been serious bombing going on by various parties in these towns of Syria, and one of those towns is where you want to visit, then this is not the right time to visit. So avoid this risk for now, and then probably plan to go there sometime later when things calms down. So this is how good corporate intel can also help to avoid risks, right? Now just to sort of understand how these risks are handled by various teams within an organization, some of these terminologies may not be very familiar to you, so I'll just try and decode them. So in a support function, you have corporate and protective intelligence teams. So what do? They try and figure out what are the business risks and disruptions and how to be prepared to deal with them. Then you also have these command centers and SOC. SOC is the Security Operations Center team. So these people monitor the business disruptions which are happening on a day-to-day basis. Like, आज इधर बंद हो गया, आज transport strike हो गया, today there's a XYZ disruption due to the weather, or the monsoon flooding has caused certain roads to be inaccessible, or because of some railway accident somewhere far away, a lot of outstation trains coming in are disrupted. So some of our employees who travel from out of the city for work, they may not be able to come. So these are the kind of disruptions that command center teams also look at. Then you have the safety and security teams who say, okay, if these are all the likely disruptions and risks, then how do we best protect our assets, which, as I said, are people, assets, technology, processes. And then last but not the least, you also have the business continuity team, whose job is to advise the management that in spite of a disruption, how can we continue business as usual? So what is known as BAU, this BAU may not be 100%. So, for example, if there is a disruption and there is a certain effect on the organization, whether it is 30% of the employees not being able to come to work because of a certain reason, or out of your 5 buildings in a factory, 4 buildings due to some electricity failure do not have any electricity. So, obviously, you cannot have business as usual, but whatever is your acceptable level of business operations, you should be able to continue. And that is where the business continuity teams advise, okay, let's do this. People who are not able to work, let them work from home. We will give them video conferencing capability. We will give them the IT login rights of site and things like that. So now, just to quickly capture, I'm not going to explain any of this. So these are various business risks in India. So if you would really like to learn more about this, we have a very nice, comprehensive and concise document uploaded on the MidCat's website called the India Risk Review, which we update every year. And Pallavi and Shreyas have also been part of construction of this document some years back. So I urge you to look at this. But now to quickly cut to the chase, as far as corporate intel is concerned, when we say corporate intel, we are talking about people who are supposed to monitor what's happening in offices or in plants and things like that. So primarily the risk parameters that we look for under the circumstances are crime, extremism or terrorism, because this can happen to any city anywhere today. Natural hazards, definitely, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's dust storms, whether it's heat wave, whether it's monsoons. India is a country where every sort of natural calamity does take place. Organizations along the east coast would also be worried about cyclones. Organizations who are in cities which do not have good infrastructure would also be affected by urban flooding. In the case of Chennai, which happened a few years back, Kerala, which happened last year, and Mumbai and Gurgaon, which happens every year. Similarly, activism and civil unrest is something which is more and more impinging on day-to-day operations, is disrupting daily life in most of the urban centers. So this is something which corporate intel people have to be on the lookout for. Health and disease, I think the current pandemic is a clear example of how health issues or pandemics can completely throw economic and financial activity out of kilter. And last but not the least, where you have infrastructure roads issues, where due to electricity or power or roads or rail or air transport issues, you have disruptions to business. So these are all the risk intel parameters that corporate intel professionals would be seriously looking at from a operational and a functional, or what I called earlier as a tactical perspective. So, what is the role of Intel in risk management? If I may be able to summarize quickly in this one infographic. So, firstly, establish the context, which is to say that, okay, what are the issues that could be of consequence to my organization where risks will disrupt us. Second is to identify the various threats which manifest themselves. So obviously, if you are talking about let's say coal mine, or if you are talking about a refining plant in Jharsuguda in Odisha, which is more affected by Maoist activity, you would be looking at more of external threats and how things can affect your people. Whereas if you are looking at operations of a corporate entity in Noida or in Sikandrabad or in Bangalore, then you would be looking at completely different threats. So there would be a little bit of overlap, but by and large, the threat vector matrix would completely vary in these. Then obviously, based on whatever threats, you also correlate it. Like I said, threats always exploit vulnerabilities to pose risks. So identify which are the organizational vulnerabilities, and then based on that, work out what are the risks and classify these risks. So this is all not just part of the intel, corporate intel people's job. This is also part of the risk function in an organization. It is part of the security function. It is part of the safety function, the admin, the transport. Everyone works together, including IT, cybersecurity. All of them work together to work out these details. But Intel has a very important role to play. And last but not the least, also to suggest controls. Now, what controls will be actually put in place to mitigate these risks will depend upon the management's risk appetite, how much they are willing to concede, how much they are willing to spend in these controls, whether these controls have cost benefit analysis. After cost benefit analysis, they figure out that these controls are worth the money. That's it. That's how I would classify it. Now, coming on to a typical case study of corporate or IT parks where we have large populations, multiple tenants, MNCs, 24/7 operations. So issues of power, water, public transport, connectivity, telecom, broadband, waste disposal, approach roads, canteens, so many things have a great deal of relevance to the day-to-day operations of these. And natural and man-made disasters, transport disruption, civil unrest, protest, all of these can completely paralyze such operations. So hence there is a necessity to have a 24/7 operations business continuity planning, and also keep a track of local neighborhoods. What are the amenities, who are the emergency responders, how will they come and help you, what's happening in the external environment. And so to understand all these local risks, what are the cross dependencies, who's going to help us, who can help us, what is the emergency response, what is the transport backup, etc., you need a large amount of local and generic intel. So intel can be at various levels, right from worrying about, okay, who's going to be the next superpower in the world, down to, okay, which road of mine is going to be blocked by the protesters which are protesting against XYZ issue, and hence my employees who are coming in the afternoon shift will not be able to come to work. So actually Intel challenge is quite immense in an organization, because one is there is today, so 10 years back there used to be a shortage of information. Today we have reached an absolutely reverse situation where there's an information overload, because you have huge number of global and let's say world level service providers who give you huge amounts of information. But honestly, if you're sitting in Noida and you're more concerned about what's happening in your Noida office or your Bangalore office or your Chennai office, you really don't need to know what's the current situation, the oil situation in Venezuela or something like that. So sometimes there's a bit of an information overload and people don't know how to handle it. Secondly, there are a lot of social media rumors which I don't need to tell you about. And then internal stakeholders are always asking for more information. Okay, what's happening? What's happening? Tell me. And they want to know immediately. So I'll give you a very, very interesting example. One of our clients who we provide information services to, they said, can you tell us how is going to be the fallout of the pandemic in Pune city after 1 month? Now we were really stumped, because today I don't think anyone on this earth is qualified to make any statements related to this. Probably we can point out some trends in terms of infection rates and recovery rates and all that, but we don't even know when the lockdown is going to open, where is the infection spreading. So sometimes internal stakeholders or people have very unrealistic expectations, and then they get very upset when you are not able to give them these answers. So also we have a lack of credible and actionable inputs. So these are all the uh, challenges for the business continuity management or the chief security officer or the intel people. And then you also have to monitor the external environment in a large field. So how can this be done? One is to collaborate with partners and other people in the same field, rely a lot on local sources. So you have to develop those local sources. Then you also need to sift through huge amounts of open source media. So just as an example, I mean, I am not saying that this is something that any of you should do, but just I was calculating, on an average I am reading about 30 to 40 articles a week, a day, now on various topics, mostly related to how some issues may affect my client. So I can imagine that somebody who's working in this field of intel for a particular organization must be having to read even more. And then you have analysts who are sort of doing this work. Then you need to have region specific expertise, because some issues can only be understood by somebody who lives in that area or who has worked in that area, and more so today has some language, local language specialization, who can understand what's happening in the local media. You also have to have the ability to outreach to multiple agencies. Now these multiple agencies could be the local fire station for fire related issues, a local police station, traffic wardens, traffic control room, NDMC, that's a disaster management cells, or the state. Here, today, in case of the pandemic, more and more people are relying on the health ministries or the state health ministries or the hospitals or whatever. Then you also need to monitor vernacular media, because most often the local news channels have the ground information fastest. And then today, more and more, you have artificial intelligence where your search engines are becoming smarter and smarter, and you can actually teach them to search for the right news. And this is what we in Midcat do. We have our own proprietary search engine, which with artificial intelligence helps us to bring us inputs which are more close to our clients' requirement. And all of this then after monitoring actually needs to be analyzed, which is why I put analysis in the central part of this slide. Then you have huge amount of social media where people get puzzled, and you know uh, the social media confuses and overloads the viewer. It takes away your attention from the main issue, creates huge amount of biases and prejudices, and then appeals to religion, caste, and nationalism. So people who may be thinking in terms of neutral terms, sometimes by virtue of the social media bombardment, they start thinking along the lines of their ethnicity or their nationality or some such issues, which is not the best way for corporate intel to function, because they really need to be unbiased and neutral. And then of course you have huge amount of media hype where the same issue can be presented in completely different four different for example, if you see the right side of the slide, the Ram Janmabhoomi issue, I've shown just a snapshot of how four different kinds of channels tackled it completely in opposite directions. And of course the left one is self-explanatory, how non-issues can get blown up to huge issues, and major mainstream issues can also get sidelined as a result of this. So there is a huge amount of information that can be captured. So you have your OSINT, which is called open source intelligence. You have search engines, print media, social media is today the fastest way, also the most confusing way of finding information. Then you have travel websites like TripAdvisor, Make My Trip, etc. You have various government websites. Most of these are supposed to give you the authentic figures, but sometimes because the way they function, they are slow to update their inputs and their information. So you have to use all these sources as with a mix, and um, judiciously. So you also have to be able to search effectively by using good keywords, symbols, filters. This is a whole completely different topic in itself, for which we actually conduct for people who want to do it. In Midcat, we conduct a full day course on how to do information search and converting it to intelligence. And then you can also search for similar things on the. One more very important facet in corporate intel which has coming today is how to filter out fake news. So you have to check and compare news from multiple sources, read between the headlines, check the date of the news item, flag what is fake, and then last but not the least, you also have the option of visiting various fact checking websites. These are listed below. These are just some of them, not all of them. And it requires more than just technology. It requires a lot of brain and a lot of reading. Sorry, Shreyas, I'm not allowing you to jump in with any of your questions, but let me just finish the basics, and if there's anything, then do stop me anywhere.
No, sir. Actually, please continue. It's a very engaging session, and I think everyone's enjoying it a lot. So please continue.
Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of an illustration of how we convert this information into intelligence. And this is how we do it in Midcat. So I'm sure each organization has its own processes, and this is just a suggested generic method. So you have inputs coming in, ground inputs from client sides. Then you have a RPA-based customized search engine and analyst input. So RPA is robotic process automation, which is what our search engine does. And then you have social media monitoring and sentiment monitoring, and all of this is put into a portal which we have of our own. So you need not have so much technology. You can also do it manually, mentally. You can also have a lot of technology and sort of convert all of this what we are doing into big data analysis processes. But sometimes we find that ground inputs and local understanding is more important. And what is more important than the machine, after all, is the human brain. So we have a number of subject matter experts and experienced analysts who then filter out all this information, and then they push it out in various modes to our clients. So in a push model, they give a daily tracker, they give alerts on WhatsApp, SMS, email. You also can have a pull model where the whole information is displayed on a portal or on a mobile app, and essentially what you need to have is actionable operational intel on a live dashboard. Now this live dashboard can also be laptop based, it can be mobile based, or it can be I don't want to show you the picture because that's of one of our client sites, where most of our clients today are displaying this proprietary portal of ours into their command centers, where the input gets updated as and when events take place. So this is just one suggested process. By and large, there will be minor variations to this. So I've just tried to illustrate how the whole system works. And definitely there's a huge amount of effort required to convert this information to intel. So you need to make sure you have credible sources, then you need to check for fakes. Then, like I said, you need to collaborate. So whom do you need to collaborate with? Internal people, external people. So you also need to, if you are talking about something which is a transport disruption or a transport strike, which is coming up, which is likely to disrupt your company transport operations, you should be able to collaborate with your transport head or your admin head to find out, okay, look, there is talk that XYZ places roads are likely to be closed and this suburb is likely to be closed. So can you tell me how many of our buses will be impacted, how many of our employees travel during that time? And then you also need to collaborate externally. So you should be able to reach out to the website of the traffic police, or the actually call up the traffic police control room and say that, okay, what all diversions are you putting in place, because we heard that there's a big political rally in so and so location tomorrow. So based on that, then you have to put two and two together, connect the dots and say, okay, this is the timing of the this is the timing of the rally, this is the chances of the rally going bad or becoming violent, this is the routes that our company transport takes which are likely to be affected by this rally. In that company transport, there are so many buses, so many cabs, and hence so many the timing is such that 300 of our employees, for example, are likely to be stuck or coming late or will have to be brought in early. And then accordingly you suggest that, okay, we should bring in the employees early, or tomorrow just give these 300 people a work from home, or have them coming in for the afternoon shift, or whatever decision. That's a management decision. As a corporate intel people, you are just supposed to suggest. And finally, all of this should be put together in an intel report. Now, very important to understand that an intel report is the crux of the whole intel operation, where you need to have something which is informative, logical. It should be short enough for management to read. It should be very, very audience specific. Whom are you making the report from? It should be purpose relevant. And last but not the least, today people have very less retention capability and very less ability to absorb too many words. So it should be visually appealing. Basically, what it has to tell you is that as an overview, what's going to happen, get them interested in it, explain the content, and finally summarize that what are the important takeaways, what do we as an organization should do, or how should we take this, what is the impact of this event, and how should we analyze it, what will be the fallout on us, and hence what mitigation measures should we put in place. So this is how good intel can be converted into a good. So typically it will contain description, it will have an analysis of various issues, it will have an impact assessment which tells you, okay, what are the future outcomes basis the courses of action that you decide to take. And last but not the least, like I said, it should have recommendations as to what course of action should be implemented. The last part about intel, and yeah, I know I've taken a little bit more than the time that I should have, is generation of travel risk advisories, because today a large amount of business travel takes place, both short term, long term, for meetings, for site assessments, for striking deals, for setting up new businesses in different places, whether it's in different parts of the country, outside the country, tough parts of the world. So the intel people also are largely instrumental in putting together this kind of information, which is going to be very destination specific, date time specific, and also give advice to make decisions for safe business travel. And they are generally prepared upon request, depending on who's traveling for how long. And intel is essentially, so this is what I'm going to point out, essentially intel is a business enabler, because businesses in India are exposed to volatile environment and operational risks, and good intel teams and processes can help to save lives as well as to protect assets. And last but not the least, good intel will reduce the effect of these disruptions and also improve your BAU, which is try and bring you back to business as usual. Now, sorry, I have just finished the explanation of the Intel part, Pallavi. I know it took a little time, and if you want to interject here before I just quickly briefly touch on the career options, I'll be very happy. Or if
All right.
somebody has any questions here.
So just one question we already
one question we already
have is from Amir.
have is from Ahmed.
He's talking about how do you define
He's talking
credible
about how do you
sources?
define credible sources.
Most of the media channels
Okay.
are media biased, and reports are presented in a way which support their favorable people or institutions. So how do you do? I think you did touch on this, but just if you could elaborate on that. And I do have a question after that. I'll let you ask.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So that's a real tough one actually, because today it's become more and more difficult, and every day people ask me the same question: that which media sources do we trust? So honestly, I would say trust no one. Trust your judgment. But then obviously, because we as individuals do not have the capability to do as much research as a good media organization has, we have to rely upon some of them. So I don't want to take any names at this stage, but you should understand which media organization is biased towards which political party or which interest group. And if you have that in the back of your mind when you're listening to a video or a news item, or when you're reading a newspaper or a magazine, if you have that in the back of your mind, you should be quite safe. So if you know that XYZ channel leads towards the ruling party, this channel leads towards the opposition party, this newspaper is funded by environmental NGO, this magazine is funded by a media or by an industrial house which has always been leaning towards the opposition party, then these kind of things, this is not just at national level, I'm also talking at the regional level, at the vernacular. If you read, that's why I said you need to read a lot. You need to read a lot. Read the same article, one piece of news, read it from at least 8 to 10 different sources. Then over a period of time, you will see a pattern emerging. You will see a trend emerging. For example, I mean, I have been reading a magazine called The Economist for the last, I think now 30 years. And I can say very openly, because I have been putting it on my blog, on my LinkedIn posts as well. It has a very, very anti-India stance. I have no idea why they do so. So anything which I read in The Economist, they have fantastic information and analysis, but as far as India is concerned, they are heavily anti-India. So I know in my mind when I'm reading something in The Economist, okay, I'm going to take only 50% of this as truth, and the rest 50% I will read other sources to ascertain what is the reality. So it takes time. It takes a lot of so there are no right answers at the same time. I hope I have been able to answer that without being very specific. Yeah, Pallavi, something you had to say.
Pallavi, you're on mute.
I forgot to unmute. So, do you want to answer a few questions before we go into the career section? Because we do have a few already.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure.
So, actually, Sanket has asked, what are the quantitative tools? Are there any quantitative tools and methodologies on which you assign risk as very high, medium, low? How do you assign risk, quantitative tools? So,
okay, so that's a very interesting question, and which is why I suggested that you should read ISO 31000 and the other ISO, which is more related to business continuity management. And by and large, they are in consonance with each other. And most companies do what they create. They create something known as a risk register, where they note down all the. So it's a complicated job. Let me assure you that, and that's why you have large number of people who are qualified to do that, or we have people like us who do it for other companies. So you have you list out all the threats, and you ascribe them some sort of quantitative numbers based on what is your organization's request. So it can be A to D, it can be 1 to 5, it can be 1 to 3, it can be 1 to 10, depending on how your global perspective is or how you want to do it. Then you work out all the vulnerabilities. Then you say, okay, based on the vulnerabilities, if this is a particular threat, if in my location the key threat is, let's say, of urban flooding, what are the vulnerabilities that this will be able to affect? My electric power supply is through unverified lines, or let's say unprotected lines. My generator set is in the basement. My XYZ is so and so. So, then you work out all the vulnerabilities and say, look, I am going to be seriously affected. The risk factor in case of this can be ascribed as medium, high, or high. Or you can put a numerical value to it and say it's going to be 3 out of 5, or you say it's going to be 7 out of 10, or whatever. So each company has its own way of doing it, ascribing numerical values or something and coming based on a multiplication factor to work out what is the severity of the risk that we are anticipating. I think I've been able to answer that very generically, but it's not so simple. Believe me, everyone gets it wrong once in a while.
Yes, sir. So it's a very long, you have to study for a very long time about this before we come up with these kind of registers. I think you're right. So another question was, how does Intel deal with uncertainties like the current COVID situation, and where threats and risks cannot be preempted and information is clouded? So that's a question by Radhika Halbar.
Yeah, that's a good question again. But then, like some people said, a pandemic of this sort can be read. Okay, maybe the severity of the pandemic spread cannot be really well anticipated, but I think most of us by January beginning, if we were smart, we had a fair idea of what to do. Just giving you an example, I mean, before the rest of the Indian corporate world shifted to work from home in midcat, we had already shifted from 100% work from home almost 2 weeks before it was announced by the government. And for example, simple thing like understanding that this is understanding the science behind it, that this is a kind of virus which is spread through respiratory infection. If you were smart, you had already started wearing masks, irrespective of, I was quite surprised the UNICEF site and WHO and some other agencies said that, don't wear a mask because it is counterproductive. Now, I was quite surprised. So that's where your understanding of risks comes in. Don't take everyone else's advice blindly. Work out the consequences of something for yourself. You'll be able to foresee what's happening. Definitely, if you have a virus which has no current vaccination or has no current cure, you also have something which is spread through social transmission, through the respiratory tract, through breathing. Then obviously that it is going to have serious fallout. Now, how serious, honestly, I don't think anybody in the world could really predict well. But if you were a business risk professional by January, if you had not predicted that something serious is going to happen by the end of March, then I don't think you have been doing your job diligently.
Great. So I know there are a bunch of questions, but there's an important section for a lot of our junior analysts who are here or early
So what we'll do is run through the career path section very briefly.
Yes, sir.
And if there is time, there is still question. Honestly, I don't have a problem in overrunning time. If people want to stay on and ask questions, I'll be happy to answer, and we can continue. So, but nevertheless, let's try and wind up on time.
Sure,
so there are various career options in this field. You can become part of a GSOC, which is a global or regional security operations center. You can become a leader. You can become part of protective intelligence. You can also do hardcore geopolitical analysis, which only focuses on the fallout of, okay, what's going to happen between countries and within at the international level, and how will it affect our business in the long term. You can go into hardcore business analysis. Business analysis is more focused on, let's say, your particular line of business. For example, if you are in Amazon or if you are in Flipkart, trying to ascertain how the other retail or e-commerce platforms are going to perform as compared to you. What are the risks to them and versus us? SOC operations, I think I already mentioned. So you also do not just external environment, but internal also, alarms, CCTV, etc. You do a lot of field intel work. So you can be assigned to, like I told you, projects have various risks. So if your company needs project risk analysis, you could be assigned to a company. So generally, this is not something which is done in-house by companies. So we've done project risk analysis for many companies. We have our own intel teams for that. Military is something which you can get into think tanks and support them, like CLAWS, CAPS, Naval Maritime Foundation, etc. You can also become part of an insider threat monitoring program of a company. So that is more using wasn't open source intelligence to do background verification, to do character sketches, to do social media searches about backgrounds of employees or competitors or something like that. Then you can also do political analysis, where purely you are analyzing, okay, what is the political issues in the region where our plants are operating or where our companies are operating, what is the fallout of that and how it's going to affect us. Then the risk analysis, where you are part of the people who make the risk registers, work out something which is known as BIA, business impact analysis. Then you also help in the business continuity planning or things like that. And last but not the least, where you have geographical analysts who use GIS tools like Google Earth or more sophisticated tools to plot out environmental risks to their operations or things like that. And just as an example, how is it different? I've just illustrated one typical case where, as a threat intel analyst, you are asked to give it and give a advisory. So your company's CEO, who's expatriate or a foreigner, and their wife and kids want to attend the Kumbh Mela in India. So as an ordinary perspective, if you were part of the HR or the admin department, you would have said, the left side box where you say, what is this Kumbh Mela all about? What is its cultural relevance? Then you say, okay, these are the good hotels, these are the good tourist avenues around that. What are the major events which you should not miss? Okay, शाम को ये होता है, दोपहर को ये पूजा होती है, in the evening there is XYZ. Then you list out all the hotels, transport. Okay, these are the good buses, these are the restaurants which offer local cuisine, and what to expect in terms of religious outlook, gathered populace. Whereas if you're a analyst who's looking at corporate intel, then straight away your focus changes. You'll say, okay, what is the characteristic of the region? How serious can it become if things go out of hand? Will there be any mob violence? Is there likelihood of being a stampede? Then you do a historical analysis of try and figure out, have there been any untoward incidents in the past, like robberies, murders, stampedes, mob violence, etc., etc., or let's say molestation or physical assault or something. Then you list out all the safe hotels and the transport facilities. Then what all perspective you should be able to get in terms of what are the crowds like, how to dress, how to equip oneself, what all things to carry, what is the language, how to prepare, take a bodyguard, don't carry valuables, don't wear short sleeve shirts, things. I'm just saying your whole perspective changes. And so in this field, career is always a mixture of market, passion, and your skills. So you need to have the opportunity, you need to have the skills, and you need to have the interest. This is very academically very easy to say and very nice to put across in form of a Venn diagram in a typical marketing mode. But sometimes what happens is something like this, where you learned something else. So we have very interesting cases in my own organization where somebody studied sociology and now are doing cybersecurity risk analysis, or you have somebody who studied geopolitics at the international level and is currently trying to figure out which roads are going to be blocked due to the containment zones when work from home comes to an end and work resumes as normal. So there is no hard and fast rule as to who can fit in, but I think anybody with passion, interest, good communication skills can get into this field. You need to understand the business. You need to have a good 360-degree outlook. Don't look very narrow and focused. Have a great passion for research and reading, because you need to understand the bigger picture and convert it into actionable intelligence. So I've got a very interesting question for you, which somebody can answer towards the end. What does the melting of the Arctic ice have to do with the locust swarm which came over certain parts of India yesterday? We'll hold this question to the end of the session. Just repeating it. What does the melting of the polar ice cap in the Arctic region have to do with the locust swarm which has put Indian agricultural states into a danger zone? The next point is you need to have a little bit of speed reading skills, scan and register quickly, large amount of tolerance for ambiguity. You should be able to take on different topics at a sudden stretch. Okay, you might be an expert in cybersecurity, but tomorrow if everything else comes to a halt and you have to try and decipher what is the test positive rate and the death rate due to pandemic in your city, well, you need to learn that science and quickly figure out what inputs your management wants. You have to be able to do multitasking, so external threats, internal issues, do everything, handle calls at the same time, compiling reports, reading databases, have a good filtration process to cut the clutter and focus on the main issues. Now, last but not the least, you need to have good writing skills because your quality of English will matter. Today, we function in a multicultural and multinational environment where English is by and large the lingua franca for all reports and returns. So you need to understand the business dictionary, things like I've been introducing words to you like BAU and vulnerability and risk. You need to understand these well. You need to understand the sensitivity of certain words. So instead of rape, it is better to use a word like sexual assault or sexual harassment or something like that. And last but not the least, you should understand the ABCs of writing, which is very simple. It means accuracy, brevity, and clarity. So again, writing should be accurate, it should be brief, and it should be clear. So just giving you 3 case studies of career progression where you start as an analyst. In the first case, you become a senior analyst, you become a team lead. So typical cases, Pallavi, who's also hosting the show, where she started off as an analyst with some other organization. She came to us as a senior analyst. She became the team lead. And hopefully in a few years down the line, she'll be the corporate intel manager of some huge multinational organization. And I shall apply to her for a job. And in the second case, you have somebody who goes the same way and becomes a very, very regional analyst. So we have another few examples. I don't want to name them. Pallavi, can you just check the participant list? Is Shraddha Bhandari on the joinees?
So I don't think Shraddha's there here, no. But I...
Okay. Okay, so a typical case where, I'm just taking some names, please don't quote me. We have somebody who joined us, there's another Pallavi, not the one who's hosting, where she joined as an analyst. She's a senior analyst and became a regional analyst sitting in Malaysia for one of our multinational clients. And I'm very sure she'll grow up and become the global Intel manager very soon. I have a third case where I was taking the name of a person, Shraddha Bhandari. I had asked her permission to quote her case, where she started off as an analyst with Deutsche Bank. Then she became a senior analyst in Barclays. She became an entrepreneur. She runs her own corporate intel company called Intelligentsia. Please Google it and go to her website and visit what she does. And she also has this great capability as virtue of her organization to be able to partner with governments and think tanks to offer them great insights in corporate intel. So these are the various options for career progression. So there are some FAQs which I've listed out. Pallavi, like I said, I already have some questions in mind. So if anybody wants me to address any of these, I'll take them on, or then I leave the house open for questions.
Sure. So I think that was a great summation of what a lot of people have in terms of...
So we'll get back to the FAQs. This is quickly to summarize my talk, and then we'll get back to the FAQs and questions. What we have learned today in this session is what is corporate intel, what are the business risks and disruptors, how to convert information to intel, and last but not the least, what are the various career options in corporate intel. So now I will keep shut, Pallavi. Honestly, I will let people talk.
No worries, sir. So I think I've already got a lot of messages on the chat and on other places where they've said that it's a great presentation, and I think people did find it very useful. So so just going back to a few questions, I'll keep mine for the end because there are already a few questions. So Moira has asked that because you spoke about the career, so in terms of putting a balanced team together to deal with this function, what are the recommended skills and competencies to look for in develop?
Sorry, Pallavi, your voice broke up partially, so I missed half of the question.
So can you hear? So can you hear now?
Yes. Can you hear now? Yes, yes.
So I think it's just when you're putting this team together, what are the skill sets and competencies that you look for, and that's how much you develop?
Okay, so I think I already flashed that on a slide, but essentially, if I were to recapitulate or recapture 3 things that a good analyst for corporate intel needs to have is great reading and analytical skills. Second is very quick and accurate research skills. And the third is excellent written communication skills. I think if you have these three, this combination of three, you can be unbeatable.
Okay, perfect, sir. So another one is from Charuvati. She's asking about, can you give a brief about the intellectual property side of corporate intel related to patent pricing, trade wars, R&D costs?
Um, okay, I'm not sure whether this question is something that I can answer in any brief amount of time. And let me assure you that most of these platforms which offer corporate intel solutions, most of them have customized solutions. They will always have a la carte menu where you can go and pick 3 or 4 services, add them together, and pay for a price. So difficult to quantify how much each one of these services costs. Typical example is subscriptions to, let's say, an organization like Stratfor. So if you go and ask for a subscription, if you say, I want to read about Asia Pacific, you pay a certain amount. If you want to read about Asia Pacific plus North America, then you pay so much, and things like that. So it's all a combination of mix and match. But there are large number of platforms available. You have to sort of screen through all of them. And I assure you that if you join a particular MNC or an organization which already subscribe to such platforms, you don't have to worry about the cost.
Perfect, sir. So another question, I think you did touch on geopolitics, but there is a student who's saying that he wants to work in corporate intel. And I know you touched on the different courses, but when he's trying to enter such a thing, field, what are the good sources to start reading from? I think because he has little to no understanding is what I would get from this. So what are the basics that he should start from in terms of the sources?
So one is, of course, open source media. Start reading national level media, which is more reliable, less sensationalism. My suggestion is watch less videos, read more words. You'll probably do better. Second, at the cost of repetition, the next weekend, that is 6th and 7th June, we have a 6th June, sorry, 6th June, we have a course which MidCat is running, a full day course on corporate intelligence. It would be really useful for new entrants and students who want to enter this field to do this course, because it gives you a complete overview from top to bottom about what is all this corporate intelligence about.
Okay, perfect. So one question is, I think I'll combine it with my question. I think Pranjal wants to know, how do you rate India in terms of business risk? But I would like to ask, going forward in the next year or so, what do you see the risks for businesses operating in specifically India, but also in the worldwide stage, I think?
So if I talk at a very, very macro level, I'll say the major risk today for businesses, I'm not talking of operational risk now, I'm talking of strategic and economic risks, where we are looking at reverse globalization, where countries are trying to become more and more region specific or more and more nationalistic in their outlook, and saying that, okay, we don't want to have any dependency on our supply chains or our raw materials towards China or XYZ, and we want to try and make as much as possible locally, get as much as possible done within our region, or shift from a more authoritarian state to a less authoritarian state, or to shift. So from that perspective, you may find some shifts in businesses taking place from the Americas and Europe to the other countries of Asia Pacific in the near future. So we are looking at Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines, Indonesia, because these are places where technology is catching up, where language skills are available, good skilled manpower is available. This may translate in a few years down the line to some countries in Latin America as well, but I'm not sure unless their infrastructure catches up. As far as India is concerned, in this global scenario, there is a lot of hype going on that, everyone's going to move out of China and they're going to move to India. I don't see that happening in a big hurry, because of the major issue that we are not yet not yet ready for it. And I would say that two major risks in this that the Indian system currently poses to new businesses is the infrastructure availability, where we are not yet ready with our power, with our SEZs, with our roads, with our port facilities, with our screening procedures. And second thing is, we are not we are not ready in terms of our governance frameworks where we can offer a great, let's say, a short way of starting new businesses or ensuring our contractual obligations are met under the under the rule of international law, our patents processes, etc. So, two major risks to businesses from the Indian perspective, other than whatever else is already there. So, I'm just saying we already have issues like natural and man-made disasters. We already have issues of pandemics, population, etc. Two major risks that India will sort of deter expansion of commercial activity into India will be infrastructure risks and governance risks.
Sure, perfect, sir. So, just before we let you go, just two questions. I think one is a more, have we seen government and private intelligences collaborate to curb any kind of transnational threats? And specifically in case of India, have we had anything where we've had such kind of collaborations?
So, firstly, I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question because what governments do, I'm not really privy to that. To a certain extent, yes, there is a little bit of collaboration, but I'm not very sure how successful it has been in actually mitigating any risk or sort of averting any untoward incidents, because government agencies look at risks from a very national perspective. Private agencies look at it from a very corporate perspective, and they change their outlook depending on what their clients want. So there may be a particular client who's into the oil and gas sector, while just as an example, so while the government is looking at de-risking activities in oil and gas exploration at the national level, the companies and the intel agencies who are providing inputs for these may be suggesting a better workaround these risks. So they may sometimes be at cross purposes also.
Sir, before we let you go, last question from me, because I think a lot of young professionals are here. So from your experience over the years, what are the three key wisdoms or three things that everyone should keep in mind when you're working in corporate Intel?
Okay, that's a really tough one. I don't know whether I'm, again, the best qualified to answer that. But my first point would be understand what your business does, because don't take off on a tangent and don't start analyzing things which are of no consequence or little consequence to our business. So first is understand your business. Second is understand the risks that can manifest themselves to your particular business, and to be able to taken seriously in the organization, provide workable, cost-effective recommendations. I think that is how I would sort of try and sum it up.
Yes. Perfect. So I'd really like to thank you for your presentation. I think everyone really, like from the feedback I've received, I think it's very useful for everyone. So thank you so much for that. And I'd like to thank everyone who stayed on beyond this time, because everyone's really, I already see the comments about people saying it's a very valuable session. So thank you so much for that, sir. And thank you everyone for joining. Please do join next Saturday. We'll be posting details of the next upcoming session by early next week. So do check out our LinkedIn page to know what the next session is going to be. And I'm sure it's a great one too. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you, Shreyas, for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Everyone step on given the
Sushil, you had
time.
put in a one question to be addressed at the end
Hima ma'am has
Yeah,
a
sorry, go
question.
ahead.
about the connection of the locust with the ice
Oh,
cap
yes.
melting.
Okay,
Oh,
okay,
yes.
yeah, sorry. I hope someone has an answer. Anyone has an answer?
So can
I'm
I
afraid nobody.
I'm not with
Yeah, somebody else was trying to speak, I think, but otherwise, Pallavi, I don't doubt that you know the answer.
I don't know the answer. I'm going to attempt. So ice cap melting increase. So the temperatures in the sub-Saharan region have drastically changed, which has caused the rains, because of which it led to the breeding of these locusts more rampant than it usually is, and it caused these breeding ones migrated towards the western part, and then they again breeded in Pakistan, from what I remember, and then they came to India. So I'm not sure if I'm fully on, but I'll let you give the answer.
No, I think you made a great attempt, and you're by and large on the right lines, because melting of the polar ice caps puts cold water into the Pacific Ocean. Between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean, there is a difference in there's a huge difference in temperature. When I say huge, it is sometimes just 1 or 2 degrees, but it makes a lot of difference. This also affects something known as the Indian Ocean dipole, and because of that, there is a flow of winds and temperatures from the Pacific towards the Indian Ocean, and within the Indian Ocean from West Asia towards the Australian side. Also, locust eggs are laid in the North African region, in the Horn of Africa, where these can lie under the subsoil for almost 20-30 years without being hatched. And these untimely rains caused by the movement of the cold air currents can cause these larvae to hatch and obviously generate the swarm. And like you said, they keep breeding during their movement, and they are also being carried by these air currents which are moving across from the let's say the Himalayan region into the into the Bay of Bengal region, and hence these they are moving faster than they normally do, and that's the connection between the melting of the polar ice caps and locust swarms in India.
Great, sir. I think that was a great wrap up to this session. So just for everyone to understand how these things are so interlinked in our interconnected world. So thank you so much, sir. And I hope to see everyone the next weekend, next Saturday. Thank you, sir, again. And
Thanks, Pallavi. Thanks, Sushi. Great session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.